My name is Detective Thomas Monk, and in my 23 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, I had never encountered a case that affected me so deeply. It was an October morning when I received the call that would change everything. The body had been discovered by hikers on the trails near the iconic Hollywood sign, a place that should represent dreams and hope, but that day had become the scene of a nightmare. The victim was Sarah Chen, a 26-year-old woman who worked as a graphic designer downtown. What disturbed me most wasn't just the state in which she was found, but the circumstances that led her there. Her fiancé, Marcus Williams, had been the last person to see her alive. They had gone up together to hike the trail late the previous afternoon, but only he came down. When we arrived at the scene, it was disturbing in a way I had never witnessed before. Sarah was inside a navy blue sleeping bag, completely sewn shut with thick white thread, as if someone had taken time and care to seal every opening. The bag was positioned behind a large rock, partially hidden from the main trail, but visible enough to be found. My partner, Detective Rodriguez, watched in silence while I examined the scene. There were no signs of struggle on the ground around us, which suggested that she had not fought back at this location. The methodical nature of the sewing indicated premeditation and a chilling level of control. The threadwork was precise, almost professional, making this discovery even more unsettling than we had initially thought. Marcus Williams sat in our interview room 3 hours later, his hands shaking as he repeatedly ran them through his dark hair. He was a tall man in his early 30s, wearing a wrinkled hiking shirt and muddy boots from the previous day's adventure. His story was straightforward, but left many questions unanswered. According to his account, they had argued about wedding plans during their hike up to the Hollywood sign viewpoint. Sarah had become increasingly upset about his mother's involvement in their ceremony planning, and the discussion had escalated beyond what either of them expected. He claimed that in a moment of frustration, he had told her he needed space to think and had started walking back down the trail alone. When he looked back after walking for several minutes, she was no longer visible from his position. The timeline Marcus provided didn't immediately raise red flags, but something about his demeanor bothered me. He maintained eye contact throughout most of our conversation, answered questions without hesitation, and even provided details we hadn't asked for about their relationship history. Yet there was an underlying tension in his voice, a quality that suggested he was holding something back from us. Detective Rodriguez and I had worked together long enough that we could communicate with just a glance. During a break in the questioning, we stepped outside to discuss our initial impressions of Marcus and his story. The evidence at the scene didn't immediately point to him as a suspect, but we couldn't ignore the fact that he was the last known person to see Sarah alive. Sarah's apartment told a different story than the one Marcus had shared with us during questioning. Her calendar showed wedding appointments scheduled for the following week, including a final dress fitting and a meeting with their photographer. Her computer browser history revealed hours of research into honeymoon destinations and last-minute venue decorations. There were no signs of relationship troubles in her recent communications with friends or family members. Text messages between Sarah and her sister from that morning showed excitement about their upcoming wedding, not stress or concern about family conflicts. Her social media posts from the previous few days painted the picture of a happy bride-to-be, not someone experiencing serious relationship difficulties that would lead to heated arguments. The forensic examination of the sleeping bag revealed several important clues that would shape our investigation moving forward. The sewing pattern was consistent with someone who had experience with textiles or tailoring, not the random work of an amateur. The thread used was a commercial grade typically found in professional sewing or upholstery shops, not something easily purchased at regular retail stores. Most significantly, there were no fibers or DNA evidence on the exterior of the bag that didn't belong to Sarah herself. This suggested that whoever had sewn her inside had been extremely careful about avoiding leaving trace evidence. The positioning of the bag behind the rock also indicated knowledge of the trail system and the habits of regular hikers. Marcus's background check revealed information that added new dimensions to our investigation. He worked as a freelance costume designer for local theater productions, which would explain his access to professional-grade sewing materials and his skills with textile work. His employment history showed consistent work over the past 5 years, with positive references from directors and production companies throughout Los Angeles. However, there were gaps in his schedule during the weeks leading up to Sarah's disappearance, times when he claimed to be working on projects that we couldn't immediately verify. His financial records showed recent large cash withdrawals, unusual for someone who typically conducted business through checks and electronic payments. These discoveries didn't prove guilt, but they certainly warranted deeper investigation into his activities. Paragraph 8. The hiking trail where Sarah was found was well known among locals, but challenging enough to deter casual visitors. The path wound through rugged terrain with several steep sections and multiple branching routes that could confuse inexperienced hikers. Regular visitors told us that it was common for couples to hike together to the viewpoint, especially during sunset hours, when the views of Los Angeles were most spectacular. However, the area where Sarah's body was discovered was significantly off the main path, requiring someone to deliberately leave the marked trail and navigate through dense brush. This location choice suggested either intimate knowledge of the terrain or considerable time spent exploring the area beforehand. Our canvass of other hikers who had been on the trail that evening provided conflicting accounts of what they had witnessed. A retired couple remembered seeing Marcus and Sarah together near the beginning of the trail around 4:30, matching his timeline. However, a solo hiker claimed to have heard raised voices coming from the direction of the viewpoint around sunset. Approximately an hour later than Marcus claimed their argument had occurred, another witness reported seeing a man matching Marcus's description walking quickly down the trail alone well after dark, using a flashlight and appearing agitated. These testimonies created inconsistencies in Marcus's story that we needed to address during our follow-up interviews. Sarah's family painted a picture of a vibrant young woman who was deeply in love with her fiancé and excited about their future together. Her parents had flown in from San Francisco as soon as they received news of her disappearance, and their grief was overwhelming to witness. They described Marcus as a caring partner who had seamlessly integrated into their family over the past 2 years. Sarah's sister Michelle was particularly close to her and insisted that Sarah would never have wandered off the trail alone, especially not in an emotional state. According to Michelle, Sarah was an experienced hiker who was always careful about safety protocols and would never take unnecessary risks, particularly so close to their wedding date. The medical examiner's preliminary report provided crucial information about Sarah's final hours, though many questions remained unanswered. The examination revealed that she had been alive when placed inside the sleeping bag, as evidenced by the pattern of fiber inhalation and the positioning of her hands. The cause of her passing appeared to be suffocation, but there were no signs of physical trauma or struggle on her body. This finding was particularly disturbing because it suggested that whoever had sewn her inside the bag had done so while she was conscious but unable to resist. The timeline indicated that she had survived for several hours after being sealed inside, a detail that added urgency to our investigation. Marcus's second interview revealed inconsistencies that hadn't been apparent during our initial questioning. When pressed about the timeline, he became defensive and changed small details about when certain events had occurred during their hike. He couldn't explain why witnesses had heard arguing much later than he had claimed, nor could he account for being seen on the trail after dark. His explanation for the cash withdrawals was vague, claiming they were for wedding expenses that he wanted to keep as surprises for Sarah. However, when we asked him to provide specifics about these purchases, he became evasive and requested to speak with a lawyer. This shift in cooperation raised additional suspicions about his involvement in Sarah's disappearance. Detective Rodriguez discovered a crucial piece of evidence while reviewing security footage from businesses near the trail parking area. The cameras showed Marcus's vehicle leaving the parking lot at approximately 8:15 that evening, much later than he had claimed in his initial statement. More importantly, the footage showed him making multiple trips between his car and the trail entrance, carrying what appeared to be a large bag during his final trip up the path. When confronted with this evidence, Marcus maintained his innocence but could not provide a reasonable explanation for why he had returned to the trail or what he had been carrying. His lawyer advised him to stop answering questions, effectively ending our interview. The search of Marcus's apartment and vehicle provided the evidence we needed to move forward with charges. Hidden in his closet, we found the remaining spool of white thread that matched the material used to sew Sarah inside the sleeping bag. His computer contained deleted internet searches about hiking trails and information about how long someone could survive in confined spaces. Most damning was a draft email found in his trash folder, addressed to Sarah's sister, attempting to explain his actions and expressing regret about how events had unfolded. The email was never sent, but its contents provided insight into his state of mind and confirmed our suspicions about his involvement. The arrest of Marcus Williams brought some measure of closure to Sarah's family, though their grief remained overwhelming. The evidence we had gathered painted a picture of a man who had become increasingly desperate about his upcoming marriage and had made a series of decisions that led to tragedy. His motive appeared to be related to financial pressures and family expectations that he felt unable to meet, though he continued to maintain his innocence throughout the legal proceedings. The case served as a reminder of how quickly situations can escalate and how important it is to seek help when feeling overwhelmed by life circumstances. Sarah's memory lived on through a foundation her family established to promote hiking safety and mental health awareness. The investigation into Marcus Williams deepened as we uncovered more layers of deception that he had carefully constructed over months leading up to Sarah's disappearance. Financial records revealed that he had been lying about his income from costume design work, having lost several major contracts due to reliability issues that Sarah was apparently unaware of. Credit card statements showed increasing debt and multiple cash advances that he had hidden from his fiancé, creating a financial crisis that would have been exposed once they merged their accounts after marriage. His desperation to maintain the facade of success had led him to make increasingly risky decisions, including borrowing money from questionable sources that demanded immediate repayment. The pressure of keeping these secrets while planning an expensive wedding had created a situation that he felt was spiraling beyond his control. Sarah's co-workers provided additional insight into her relationship with Marcus that contradicted his portrayal of their final argument. According to her closest friend at the design firm, Sarah had mentioned concerns about Marcus's recent behavior, including his evasiveness about wedding finances and his tendency to disappear for hours without explanation. She had confided that he seemed increasingly stressed and had been avoiding conversations about their future living arrangements and joint financial planning. However, Sarah had attributed these issues to pre-wedding nerves and had been planning to address them after their honeymoon, believing that marriage would provide the security and communication framework to resolve their problems. Her trusting nature and optimistic outlook had prevented her from recognizing the severity of Marcus's deception. The forensic analysis of Marcus's vehicle revealed additional evidence that supported our timeline of events on the day of Sarah's disappearance. Soil samples from his car matched the specific mineral composition found at the location where Sarah's body was discovered, indicating that he had been in that exact area recently. Fabric fibers caught in his trunk matched the sleeping bag material, suggesting that he had transported the bag in his vehicle. Most importantly, GPS data from his phone showed that he had made multiple stops along the hiking trail route, including a location that corresponded to where we found Sarah. His attempts to delete this data had been unsuccessful, providing us with a digital trail that contradicted his statements about leaving the area immediately after their argument. The psychological profile developed by our department's behavioral analyst painted a picture of someone struggling with inadequacy and the fear of disappointing others. Marcus had grown up in a family where success was measured by financial achievement and social status, creating pressure that he had carried into his adult relationships. His relationship with Sarah represented everything he wanted to be, but felt incapable of achieving honestly, leading to an elaborate series of lies that became increasingly difficult to maintain. The analyst suggested that the methodical nature of Sarah's containment in the sleeping bag indicated both premeditation and a desire to avoid direct confrontation, consistent with someone who struggled with conflict resolution and feelings of guilt about their actions. Sarah's digital footprint revealed the extent to which she had been planning their life together, making Marcus's actions even more tragic and senseless. Her laptop contained detailed budgets for their wedding and honeymoon, careful savings plans for their future home, and research into family planning and career development. She had been secretly planning to surprise Marcus with news that she had received a promotion at work, which would have significantly improved their financial situation and alleviated many of the pressures he claimed to be facing. Text messages to her sister revealed her excitement about sharing this news with Marcus during their hike, intending to use the romantic setting of the Hollywood sign viewpoint to discuss their bright future together. The trial of Marcus Williams began 6 months after Sarah's disappearance, drawing significant media attention due to the unusual circumstances of the case and the location where her body was found. The prosecution presented a compelling case based on physical evidence, digital records, and witness testimony that painted Marcus as a desperate man who had chosen a horrific solution to his perceived problems. The defense attempted to argue that the evidence was circumstantial and that Marcus's behavior could be explained by grief and shock rather than guilt. However, the methodical nature of the crime and the extensive cover-up attempts made it difficult for the jury to accept alternative explanations for the evidence we had gathered. Witness testimony during the trial provided emotional moments that highlighted the impact of Sarah's loss on her community. Her family members spoke about her kindness, her dedication to her work, and her excitement about starting a family with Marcus. Co-workers described her as a mentor who had helped launch several junior designers' careers and who had been planning to use her promotion to create an internship program for underprivileged students interested in graphic design. Friends shared stories of her volunteer work with local animal shelters and her plans to incorporate charitable giving into her wedding registry, asking guests to donate to causes supporting domestic violence prevention rather than giving traditional gifts. The defense's strategy focused on challenging the timeline and suggesting that someone else could have been responsible for Sarah's unfortunate fate. They argued that the hiking trail was accessible to multiple people and that Marcus's presence in the area didn't prove his guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Expert witnesses testified about the technical skills required to sew someone inside a sleeping bag, suggesting that Marcus's costume design background, while relevant, didn't necessarily make him uniquely capable of the crime. The defense also emphasized the lack of direct witnesses to any violent confrontation between Marcus and Sarah, arguing that their argument could have been followed by Sarah encountering someone else who was responsible for her tragic end. The prosecution's rebuttal effectively dismantled the defense's alternative theories by walking the jury through the extensive evidence that pointed exclusively to Marcus's involvement. The combination of physical evidence, digital records, financial motive, and behavioral analysis created a comprehensive picture that left little room for reasonable doubt about his guilt. The prosecutor emphasized that the methodical nature of the crime indicated intimate knowledge of both Sarah's psychology and the hiking area, knowledge that only someone very close to her would possess. The timing of the crime, just weeks before their wedding, when financial pressures would have been exposed, provided a clear motive that explained Marcus's desperate actions. Expert testimony about the specific method used in Sarah's containment provided disturbing insights into Marcus's state of mind during the commission of the crime. The forensic specialist explained that the sewing pattern indicated someone who was taking their time and being deliberate about their actions, not someone acting in a moment of passion or panic. The quality of the stitching suggested that Marcus had practiced or planned this method beforehand, indicating premeditation that elevated the severity of his crimes. The positioning of Sarah's body and the location chosen for disposal showed calculation and an understanding of how long it might take for her to be discovered, factors that influenced the jury's perception of his intent and culpability. The impact statements from Sarah's family during the sentencing phase of the trial were heartbreaking testimonies to the life that had been cut short and the future that would never be realized. Her parents spoke about the grandchildren they would never meet and the daughter they would never walk down the aisle. Her sister Michelle described the hole that Sarah's absence had left in their family and the guilt she felt about not recognizing the warning signs in Marcus's behavior. The statements emphasized not only the immediate loss, but also the ripple effects that would continue to impact their family and community for years to come. Marcus's own statement to the court, delivered against his lawyer's advice, provided some insight into his motivations, but failed to show the genuine remorse that might have influenced his sentencing. He maintained that he had never intended for Sarah to be harmed, and claimed that events had spiraled beyond his control in ways that he hadn't anticipated. His explanation of his actions was disjointed and self-serving, focusing more on his own suffering and regret than on the impact of his choices on Sarah and her family. The judge noted that his statement demonstrated a continued inability to take full responsibility for his actions and showed little understanding of the magnitude of harm he had caused. The jury's deliberation lasted 3 days as they carefully reviewed the extensive evidence and testimony presented during the trial. Their questions to the court focused primarily on technical aspects of the forensic evidence and the specific legal requirements for the charges Marcus faced. When they returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, the courtroom was filled with a mixture of relief from Sarah's family and supporters and shock from Marcus's family members who had maintained their belief in his innocence throughout the proceedings. The verdict provided legal closure to the case, though the emotional healing for Sarah's loved ones would continue for much longer. The sentencing hearing revealed the full extent of Marcus's deception and manipulation, not only in his relationship with Sarah, but in his interactions with investigators throughout the case. Additional evidence presented during this phase showed that he had attempted to create false alibis and had contacted potential witnesses to influence their testimony. His efforts to manipulate the investigation demonstrated a continued pattern of dishonesty that convinced the judge of his danger to society. The sentence of life in prison, without the possibility of parole, reflected both the severity of his crimes and the calculated nature of his actions before, during, and after Sarah's disappearance. The conclusion of Marcus Williams's trial marked the end of a case that had deeply affected everyone involved in the investigation and prosecution. The methodical nature of the crime and the betrayal of trust it represented challenged our understanding of how well we can truly know the people closest to us. For the investigators, the case served as a reminder of the importance of following evidence objectively, even when it leads to uncomfortable conclusions about human nature. The tragedy of Sarah Chen's life being cut short by someone she loved and trusted would remain with all of us, long after the legal proceedings had ended, serving as motivation to seek justice for other victims and their families. The aftermath of the Marcus Williams case continued to impact the Los Angeles Police Department's approach to investigations involving intimate partner cases and missing persons reports. The case highlighted the importance of examining financial records and digital evidence early in investigations, as these sources often provided crucial insights into motive and opportunity that weren't immediately apparent through traditional investigative methods. Our department implemented new protocols for handling cases where the last known contact was with a romantic partner, ensuring that investigators received additional training in recognizing signs of financial stress and deception that might contribute to domestic situations escalating to violence. The lessons learned from Sarah's case would help future investigators recognize similar patterns and potentially prevent other tragedies. Sarah's family established the Sarah Chen Foundation for hiking safety and mental health awareness, using their tragedy to create positive change in their community and beyond. The foundation provided funding for improved trail marking and emergency communication systems in popular hiking areas throughout Southern California. Additionally, they created educational programs about recognizing signs of relationship stress and financial abuse, working with local colleges and community centers to provide resources for young people entering serious relationships. The foundation's work ensured that Sarah's memory would be associated with helping others rather than only with the circumstances of her tragic end. The impact of the case on Marcus's family revealed the complex web of relationships affected when someone commits such serious crimes. His parents and siblings struggled with reconciling the person they thought they knew with the individual capable of such calculated actions. They faced their own process of grief and healing, dealing with feelings of guilt about missed warning signs and anger about being deceived along with everyone else in Marcus's life. Support groups for families of offenders became an important resource for them as they navigated the legal proceedings and media attention while trying to understand how someone they loved could have committed such acts. The case sparked discussions within the legal community about the challenges of prosecuting cases that rely heavily on circumstantial evidence and the importance of thorough forensic analysis in modern investigations. Legal experts noted that the successful prosecution of Marcus Williams demonstrated how multiple types of evidence could be combined to create a compelling case even without direct witnesses to the crime itself. The use of digital forensics, financial records, and behavioral analysis represented a comprehensive approach that could serve as a model for similar cases in the future. Detective Rodriguez and I continued to work together on other cases, but the Sarah Chen investigation remained a touchstone in our partnership and careers. The case reminded us why we had chosen law enforcement as our profession and reinforced our commitment to seeking justice for victims and their families. We often referenced lessons learned during Sarah's investigation when training new detectives, emphasizing the importance of patience, thoroughness, and following evidence wherever it might lead. The case also strengthened our belief in the importance of treating every victim with dignity and respect, ensuring that their stories are told completely and accurately. The Hollywood Sign area where Sarah's body was discovered became a place of remembrance for her family and friends, who occasionally gathered there to honor her memory and reflect on the positive impact she had made during her life. The location, which had initially represented the site of tragedy, gradually transformed into a place where loved ones could feel connected to Sarah's spirit and her love of nature and adventure. The hiking community in Los Angeles also adopted informal practices of checking on fellow hikers and promoting buddy system approaches to trail safety, inspired by the desire to prevent similar tragedies. The resolution of the case provided closure for Sarah's family and friends, allowing them to begin the long process of healing and finding ways to honor her memory through positive action. While the pain of losing Sarah would never completely fade, the successful prosecution of Marcus Williams ensured that justice had been served and that he would not be able to harm anyone else. The case served as a reminder of the importance of supporting victims' families throughout the legal process and ensuring that their voices are heard and their loved ones are remembered for the lives they lived, rather than only for how those lives ended. As I reflected on the Sarah Chen case years later, it continued to serve as a reminder of the complexity of human relationships and the importance of maintaining professional objectivity while still honoring the humanity of both victims and their families. The case challenged assumptions about how well we can know the people in our lives and highlighted the devastating consequences when financial pressures and personal inadequacies drive someone to make unthinkable choices. The investigation reinforced my belief in the importance of thorough, methodical police work and the power of forensic evidence to reveal truth even in the most carefully planned crimes. The Marcus Williams case became a subject of study in criminal justice programs used to illustrate the importance of comprehensive evidence gathering and the role of digital forensics in modern investigations. Students learned about the significance of financial motive in intimate partner violence cases and the warning signs that might indicate when someone is struggling with pressures that could lead to desperate actions. The case also highlighted the importance of community awareness and the role that friends, family, and co-workers can play in recognizing when someone might need intervention or support before situations escalate to violence. In the end, the investigation into Sarah Chen's disappearance and Marcus Williams' prosecution represented both the worst of human nature and the best of our justice system's ability to seek truth and accountability. The case reminded all of us involved in law enforcement why our work matters and why we must continue to fight for victims who can no longer speak for themselves. Sarah's legacy lived on through the changes implemented in investigative procedures, the foundation established in her name, and the countless people who were inspired by her story to be more aware of the relationships in their own lives and the importance of seeking help when facing overwhelming pressures. The case would remain with me throughout the rest of my career, serving as both a source of professional pride in work well done and a somber reminder of the precious nature of human life.